night on the CINA 102.3 app at CINAFM.com, on TuneIn, on smart speaker, and at 102.3 FM. CINA Radio, every device, everywhere. The following program does not necessarily reflect the opinions of the management, staff, or advertisers of CINA Radio.
Joumana Kayrouz. You've seen her images on giant billboards across the metro. Joumana Kayrouz. You've seen her images on buses across the city. Now get to know Joumana Kayrouz.
The war broke out in my home country, Lebanon. I was 11 years old, and I saw a lot of bloodshed and inequality and poverty. You can't grow up in an environment like that and not be affected by it and not want to make a difference. I graduated from Yale University with a master's in ethics. I speak 4 languages. It has always been innate in me fighting for the underdog and trying to do whatever it is I can to make a difference in the world.
Let Joumana Kayrouz protect your rights. Call the law offices of Joumana Kayrouz at 1-866-YOUR-RIGHTS, extension 100, or visit yourrights.com.
برنامج يور رايتس مع المحامية جومانا كيروز المختصة في قضايا حوادث السيارات، مع نخبة من المحامين في اختصاصات عدة منها الطلاق والهجرة والإفلاس، يأتيكم الآن على الهواء مباشرة. طابت أوقاتكم بالخير. حلقة جديدة من برنامج يور رايتس تأتيكم عبر سينا 102.3 FM. أهلا بكم. مكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز تستقبل قضاياكم المتعلقة بالبيرسونال انجريز، كار اكسيدنتس، قضايا متعلقة بالهجرة، البانكربسي، كريمنال لو، فاميلي لو، والسوشيال سيكوريتي، وقضايا إصابات العمل. الاستشارات مجانية 248-557-3645. حلقات برنامج يور رايتس تعاد مرة أخرى على الموقع الإلكتروني yourrights.com/radio أو على اليوتيوب. كل ما عليكم والبحث عن قناة جومانا كيروز. تحياتنا لكم ونرحب بجومانا. أهلا وسهلا.
صباح الخير لكل المستمعين كمان مرة. صباح الخير رامي، صباح الخير لكل اللي عم بيتسمعوا. صار لنا مدة ما استقبلنا المحامي مارك غازداكي معنا من المكتب. المحامي مارك غازداكي هو من المحاميين اللي بيقوموا بقضايا الفاميلي لو، الكريمنال لو، وأمور عديدة such as consumer law إلى آخره. بس اليوم بالتحديد رح حاوروا عن موضوع religious marriages and religious divorces, particularly Islamic marriages and Islamic divorces, وبالتحديد في opinion نزلت من محكمة الاستئناف، يعني بيقولوا بالإنجليزي the Court of Appeals. منحب نشارك المستمعين عنها، وهي يمكن بتمس كتير من المستمعين اللي هن مسلمين، اللي هن متزوجين، ولا سمح الله إذا بده يتم طلاق. هيدا شو بيعني بالنسبة لهم. Attorney Mark Gazdag, it is a pleasure to have you again. Thank you for being with us today.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Mark. You informed me. By the way, let's remind the listeners that you have 28 years of experience doing family law, doing criminal law, and other types of law, correct?
Correct.
Okay. We want to talk today. A number of our listeners are of other ethnic backgrounds. They may be Muslim. They may have enjoyed an Islamic marriage, and God forbid, they are looking at the possibility of a divorce. So we know that here in the United States, we have what's called the separation of church and state. However, excuse me, it is a reality that there is a religious marriage that 2 parties have entered to, and the question often arises as to whether or not a court of law here in the United States can force 2 parties to be religiously divorced. And a lot of people don't know that answer because there is no federal law on this. There is no United States Supreme Court law on this. There have been laws in different states trying to deal with that issue. I think you talked to me about the state of New Jersey being one. Now you're telling me that the Michigan Court of Appeals has rendered an opinion that addresses Islamic or religious marriages, correct?
That's very correct.
Before we say and we explain to the listeners what the Michigan Court of Appeals has ruled, and it's a published opinion. Not every opinion is published. not to complicate it for our listeners, it is an opinion to be taken seriously because it's published. You also say, Attorney Mark Gazdagi, that it is your belief that's going to be appealed to the Michigan Supreme Court. Somebody's going to be upset about it, some party, and appeal it, you think, we don't know, you think, to the Michigan Supreme Court, correct?
That's correct, because it affects so many people.
Because it affects so many people here in the state of Michigan. Because we have a lot of people here in the state of Michigan who are religiously divorced, married, religiously married, in addition to being civilly married. Correct. So, before we talk about what the Court of Appeals opinion states, I want you to walk me through something called a prenuptial agreement. And the reason I am talking about that first is because once we learn what a prenuptial agreement is or what a prenup agreement is, then it will become easier to explain to our listeners what the Michigan Court of Appeals was saying, correct?
Correct.
Okay. What is the definition of a prenuptial agreement?
A prenuptial agreement is a contract. Basically, one person, the male, and the other person, the female, want to have some certainty.
Can I interrupt?
Sure.
When does it take place? Before the marriage, during the marriage, or after the marriage?
Before the marriage.
Okay, prenuptial. Pre, meaning before the
Before.
nuptials.
Before.
So it's before,
Yes.
okay?
It's
It
sort
is
of
a contract.
sort of like an insurance policy for marriage.
Oh, that's a good. Oh, I like that.
But sometimes what you see is a lot of times with prenuptial agreements, it's a contract. It's an open, bargain for terms in a contract.
It's the result of discussions.
Yes,
it's the result
it's
of
a meeting of the minds of the two parties saying this is what will happen if the marriage does not work out.
Okay, so it's a contract between, say, a man and a woman before they enter into the marriage, before they get married, where they say, God forbid, in the event of marriage, this is how we are going to resolve things. Correct?
Yes, and mainly it's basically dealing with property. Who owns what property, who will get what property. Like, we'll split the house.
Property division.
Yeah, we'll get the house, we'll split it, we'll sell it, or you keep the house, I'll move out. Or if I have bank accounts, what the money I had before the marriage is still mine. The money you have before the marriage is still yours. Any money we make, we'll divide it, whatever percentage you guys decide to make
In the
that
contract
in the
before
contract.
you get married.
Yes.
What about decisions as to children?
Now, as to children, you cannot contract what will happen with your children because it's always about the best interest of the children. So what your situation before you were married may be totally different by the time you're trying to get a divorce and you have children, and those children have their own needs. For example, you may have a special needs child, and we need to decide where this child will go to school, how we're going to raise the children. You just can't contract for that.
In other words, a prenuptial agreement is when two people who are intending to get married, and in the state of Michigan, same-sex marriages are now legal. So it can be a man and a man, a woman and a woman, or a man and a woman, who are thinking about getting married and want to sit down and discuss openly a number of issues they have and agree on them in a contract prior to the marriage. Typically, it is for people who are concerned about property that they own, wealthy people who come into a marriage. He has a lot of money. He may have money and kids from a previous marriage. This is possibly the new wife, wants to protect what he had before the marriage. She wants to protect what she had before the marriage. Nowadays, you have couples who both work, She may also have things to protect in addition to him. So you sit in that contract and you say, in the event of a divorce, this is how the $1 million I have in the bank that I'm walking into today before I get married to you, I'm taking that back. And the house that you've already owned in the event of a divorce, you're keeping that. And the house we're going to buy in the marriage, I'll give you in the event of children, correct?
Yeah.
So you agree on all those things. This way, if a divorce happens, those issues have already been taken care of because they are in a contract. The one thing you cannot contract in a prenuptial agreement is your children, or in this case, your future children. You will not know how many children you have. You will not know what their needs are. The courts are very protective of children. Children are protected by the court. And in fact, in a divorce action, when you go to a judge, the number one priority of the judge is the best interest of the children, because those children did not ask to be in the situation they are in. So the courts believe that the parents are adults, they can take care of themselves, but the children are voiceless. They don't have a voice. They are vulnerable. The court will advocate for them. The court will see to it that mom and dad are giving them what these children deserve. And so for a man and a woman to enter into a prenuptial agreement and make arrangements about children they will have, what religious school they will attend, who will go with what in the event of a marriage, they can write that, but that is not valid. That will not be enforceable in a prenuptial agreement, correct?
Correct.
So a prenuptial agreement being a contract, tell us about what needs to happen for this contract to be valid.
Well, one of the things that they look for is that, first of all, that you're at equal bargaining positions.
Okay.
So, which means information. I know before I sign this document, I know all about what you're intending, all about your property, all about your finances, all about your intentions. And the same for the other party. I know the same things. We give you the opportunity to sit and discuss, negotiate what of these issues you want to place in the document. And one of the major things in a contract is the meeting of the minds. That's what all judges are trying to find out is, what were you guys intending to do at that moment in time when you signed your names to this document?
Before you got married.
Before you got married.
So in other words, it is like any other contract. You can sign and you can whatever, but if one of the parties later says, he threatened for me to sign it, he forced me to sign it, he made me sign it, or I didn't have an opportunity, to look at this, to ask questions, or there was no full disclosure. In other words, he comes to the table and he has these 10 assets, but he only told her about 7 of these assets. Well, he only chose to talk about 7 of these assets, and she entered into a prenuptial agreement with him, thinking that all that's at issue are 7 assets. Should it be discovered later, correct me if I'm wrong, that he or she was not fully transparent and did not reveal everything she and he has, then a judge, now years later, in a divorce action, when the husband wants to invoke the prenuptial agreement, the judge is going to say, I'm making this null and void because you were not clear, you were not straightforward, and so this contract was fraudulent, correct?
That's correct. It's the idea of it is clear and simple. We know what to expect. You had the opportunity to have a lawyer ma'am. You had an opportunity to have a lawyer, sir.
Not that the law
But
requires that,
It doesn't
Attorney
require
Marcus
it,
Daggy.
but it
But
gives
the more
you the opportunity
complicated,
to look at,
okay. Not that the law requires that you hire a lawyer to review a prenuptial agreement presented to you, but I think that any wise person should do that, because if you're talking about a prenuptial agreement, then you're talking about either substantial assets, or in this case, and that's why we started talking about prenuptial agreement, an Islamic religious divorce. Correct?
correct.
Okay. So now, let's forward and tell us about the facts of the people who were the subject of an appeal to the Michigan Court of Appeals.
Yes, under the current case decision, the court has said that the marriage contract that you had in addition to your civil marriage.
Are you talking about a prenup?
Yes. The marriage contract. It's considered.
You can call it a prenup.
Yeah.
Let's back up. Can you tell me about that couple that became the subject of a Court of Appeals opinion? Do you remember the facts?
I don't remember.
I know the case is not in front
Yeah.
of you. We're going to bring it at a later date.
Yeah, I don't remember particular facts.
Okay,
no.
but the question was that they were religiously married
Yes.
and they were civilly divorced,
Yes.
but still religiously married.
Yes.
Do you know if it was a Muslim couple?
It was.
It was a Muslim couple
Yes.
here in Michigan.
Yes.
Okay. And under the eyes of the law, husband and wife were free to remarry.
Correct.
However, she were still religiously married to him.
Correct.
Okay.
And under this situation, when you're negotiating your civil marriage, the court has now said that your religious marriage terms and your marriage contract can be considered a prenuptial agreement.
So you're talking about people who get religiously married and write a contract. They write a contract for dowry.
Yes.
Okay.
And that dowry can be anywhere from not being that specific, like 4 gold rings, all the way to being very specific of
And dollar
like
amounts.
In dollar amounts could be like 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, or whatever.
Okay. So if there was an agreement between a Muslim man and a woman before the marriage for dowry and it was put in writing, are you now saying that the Court of Appeals is looking at that, and it was done before the marriage?
Yes.
They're looking at that as a prenuptial
Yes.
agreement.
With this analysis, they're directing.
So it's a contract to
yes,
be.
They're directing the trial judge, your divorce judge, to look at this.
You mean the Court of Appeals?
Well, no. The Court of Appeals is telling the lower court
Yes.
judges now
Now.
to look at the marriage contract that you have.
You mean before your marriage?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, and they're going to look
And
at
we're
it.
talking
and
about
going,
those dowry contracts.
Yep,
Okay.
and they're going to read it. Mm-hmm. And they're going to decide if the terms of this agreement, if you use contract principles, like you're buying a car or a house, the same principles, if there's no like duress, fraud,
Duress
if the parties
meaning like you were forced to sign
into
it.
if the terms
Like any
are
other
clear,
contract,
like
like
any
any other
contract,
contract.
if the contract can stand up to that analysis, then we're going to call it a prenuptial agreement.
And what that means, so that we can simplify that to our listeners, that means whatever that contract says, now the civil court has to abide with.
Correct.
And if the contract says you get your dowry of this much, the court is going to say you get your dowry of this much.
Yep.
Correct?
Yes.
Now that contract can talk about dowry, but it cannot talk about children.
No.
Because that's for the state.
Yes.
That's the best interest of the children is not something you can contract away.
Correct.
You can, but it's not going to be held in a court of law. I was talking to a number of Muslim friends of mine, and one in particular has a daughter who is about to get married. And I asked him the following question. That person is a lawyer, and his daughter is getting married. They are Muslim. And I asked him whether he is concerned, should his daughter get married, and God forbid, should the marriage not work out. He was expressing some concerns with the future husband, which may or may not result in anything, negative. I asked him if he was concerned about whether or not the future husband, in the event of a divorce, his daughter will get the civil divorce, but will not be able to get the religious divorce. And here is what his answer said. Here is what his answer was, which to me was a first, and I believe for me as a first, it was brilliant. He said, listen to me. When my son, who is now divorced, got married, I gave him the following advice and he followed it. He entered into a contract with his future wife, and in the contract they addressed, should there be a civil divorce, the divorcing party is free to request and obtain the religious divorce. So he put it in a contract where he talked about dowry. And he said, I'm very fair because this is my son. So I was actually truly protecting somebody else's daughter. So he said the contract that he made sure that his son signed gave his son the freedom to, if he chose to leave this woman, to obtain the religious divorce. And it gave, which is a right already in Islamic Sharia law, but it also gave, now this is a contract, it also gave the future daughter-in-law the right to ask and obtain the religious divorce if that's what she wanted. And he said to me, sure enough, my son, our concerns about our future daughter-in-law, she wasn't for us. We weren't made of the same stock. They got divorced civilly, and they got divorced religiously. Not only because my son was that kind of person, but I protected my daughter-in-law by putting this in the contract along with the dowry before they got married. And now his daughter is thinking about getting married, and he said the same thing. I will not allow this future son-in-law, I will not give him my blessings until he and my daughter sit down and write down what happens. And he doesn't care about the dowry. Write down, he cares about his daughter being free civilly and religiously, much like his son, much like other people's daughters, by the way. So I respect him for that. What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
That's true.
He's treating people, he's treating other men's daughters the way he wants his daughter to be treated. So he did say, when the time is right, I will be sitting down with this young man, and there will be a contract before they get married that says that if you want to divorce her, you can religiously, and if my daughter requests that you religiously divorce her, you will. And I thought that was really, really brilliant.
Yeah, because it cuts down on stress.
Big time. And
Yeah.
it cuts down on what some people, unfortunately, are holding over.
Yeah, because in some religions, you can't get remarried again until you have the church's
Or
blessing.
That's right.
Which means for like Islam and Judaism, you have to get the imams or the rabbis okay to saying yes, you can get married again because your former spouse has freed you from the contract.
I will also tell you that as a Catholic myself, if I were civilly divorced, but I am not yet divorced in the eyes of the church, I will not at all feel good, and I will not enter into another civil marriage, although I am legally free to do so, because we are all believers in the end. Whether our religion is Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, we believe in the tenets. Most of us, the greatest majority of us, it is ingrained in us that we live in the tenets of our religions. And the tenets of Christianity is that if you are still Christian, religiously married, then you are not free to remarry. Yes, legally, civilly, but you will not find too many Christians, myself included, who will remarry if I know that I am not divorced in my church. The same for Jews and the same for Muslims. It's ingrained in us. Maybe it results in guilt. Maybe it makes us feel that we're disobeying God. The reasons can be very different. Maybe we're dishonoring our parents who put pressure on us. How can you be married? You haven't been yet religiously divorced. Whatever the reasons are, and I think there are many of them, I think that psychologically for a lot of people and religiously, they need both divorces to feel that they are free to remarry. Although technically speaking, in the United States, all you really need to be remarried is civilly divorced.
That's correct.
Yes.
What's interesting is one of the reasons why it's taking our country so long to deal with this issue is because in other countries, these marriage contracts, well, under U.S. opinion, is that they're like forced marriages, and you can't have a forced contract.
Oh, in the event of a forced marriage, how can you call the contract consensual?
It wasn't consensual, and it wasn't a meeting of the minds. It was like, you will sign here, you will sign here, and you're getting married.
Yes. But contrary to Western opinion, a much larger number of marriages are not forced.
Most definitely. Yes,
are not forced.
Most definitely. Actually, it's pretty progressive, and if you think about it, because of today's society with how many divorces are, what is it, up to 65% of all first-time marriages are getting divorced right now. If you had, the meeting of the minds again, before you said, I do, you would understand your partner a lot better. You would understand that this is a very serious issue because now you're treating it like you're spending almost all your money to purchase something. But in this sense, you're buying into a life.
Correct.
With each other.
Attorney Mark Gastaki, the issue of marriage and whether one can grant the other, the scenario I just talked to you about, the discussion I had with another friend of mine who is a lawyer and a Shia lawyer of Shia origin. Do you think that's something that you can, as a lawyer, do you think that's something that you can put in a contract and enforce? Because my colleague, no one opposed it, so it did happen.
Yeah.
But what if?
Well, that's still probably a good question of law still, because
yes, I know it has not been.
Because money,
but
money is easier. Money is
much easier.
It is what it is.
It's
you
just
said
property.
That it's just property division.
Correct.
But when I'm telling you, and it's in the tenets of your religion, you will do that, and we're going to back that up by the power of the state, that's a bigger question. That is
and until someone
now we have the First
takes
Amendment.
Yeah. The what?
Now we have the First Amendment Act, playing into, freedom of religion and state, no supporting or hindrance of religion.
Correct.
Yeah.
And separation of church and state. Well, it has worked for my colleague. It may work for others as long as neither party is opposing it. Yeah. But truth be told, until somebody takes up that issue to the Court of Appeals, and then to the state Supreme Court, and then to the United States Supreme Court, we will not know.
We will not know.
Because now we're talking about religion.
Yes.
Yes.
But, doing divorce negotiations for 27 years, a lot of that gets addressed between the parties.
During the civil divorce.
During the civil divorce, because you're working out what you both can live with.
Yes.
And by that time, you also understand that we're in the same church still. We're going to, after the divorce, we'll be in the same faith still. It's just easier. You move along, I move along. God bless you.
So, to summarize, the Michigan Court of Appeals opinion that came out. When did that come out, by the way? I know you put
Middle
a copy.
Of April. It's like April 16th or April 18th.
So it's very recent.
Very. It's not even printed yet.
So you put it on my desk, but I have not seen it yet. The Court of Appeals opinion specifically addresses dowry.
Yes.
And calls that when you enter into an agreement before the marriage, that should the divorce happen, he will pay you this much. We're going to call that here in America a prenuptial agreement, as long as it wasn't forced on the woman, it wasn't, it was consensual and all of that. And so that opinion only talks about dowry.
Yes.
So because, Attorney Mark Gazdecki, you have told me on more than one occasion that quite often you've had men who are who have a religious divorce, maybe often because they're angry, because they want to punish the other person, say, I'm not going to give you the religious divorce, and because I don't want you to walk free, and I don't want to pay you the dowry. Because if he divorces her, he has to pay the dowry, correct? Religiously?
Yes.
So you've told me most men who were in that situation, the argument you felt isn't so much the money, is more control. It's control. I want to control her. I don't want to let her be free religiously to remarry, and I'm not going to give her that money. But it's not so much the money, it's I want to teach her.
Yes, but then there's
I want to punish her.
Then there's also another issue too. In certain countries of origin, if you're not originally from the United States, but you were married in another country, for example, and you got your religious contract in that other country, for example, in Yemen, it can, if it's considered a crime to not abide by the contract.
Okay, let's repeat that again. And I know you serve a lot of people in the Yemeni community.
It's considered a crime if you do not abide by your contracts. So, say for example.
Oh, you mean they give the religious divorce but don't pay the dowry?
Yeah, or
so they have violated the contract terms. And in Yemen, that is not just a civil.
It's a criminal.
It's criminal.
And if you ever want to go back,
how serious is it? There is criminal on the book, and there is criminal as in we enforce it. Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you ever wanted to go back and visited your family back in Yemen, for example, and then your spouse finds out that you went back to the country and that your spouse remembers you not abiding by the contract, then they go and call their relatives. Their relatives contact the officials, and then they arrest you.
Without proof?
Well, they'll have proof. They'll say they got a divorce and he never gave her dowry.
So even when the divorce originated here, and the husband granted the religious divorce here, but did not abide by the whole thing in that he did not pay the dowry,
Yep.
then that, although it started here, the rest of that contract can be enforced back in Yemen.
Yeah. Yes. I've had some other
is
friends
it
who
because people told you? Is because you've gone through it with your case?
Other people have told me what has happened. Like
Yes.
I've had some colleagues who in another country who they were arguing about the religious contract, and to force the other party to abide by that contract, they confiscated homes in the other country and said, we're not releasing these homes until you do what you said you were going to do.
So in Yemen, they feel strongly about the dowry in order to protect women's rights.
Correct.
Because these are women who are now divorced, who may have children, and they need...
Well, it's also an honor thing.
Yes.
That's a big thing. In another country, it's a lot of your relation between the husband and wife or ex-husband and wife is still honor based on the families, and it becomes dishonorable if you do not do what you agreed upon.
That's correct.
And that
In
can
my
get
home
and that can
country-
lead up to violence.
Yes. I can tell you in my home country, Lebanon, I come from that part of Lebanon, the Bekaa Valley, where it's very tribal. And there, your word is your bond. And if you do not keep your word, it can be very, very serious. Your word is worth everything, and it can be very serious. And if you dishonor anyone of anybody else's family, they may come back. And the retribution may be not on the person who dishonored, but on the family and the family of the dishonoring person. Pride and honor is a huge thing, especially among tribal cultures. And I can tell you in Lebanon, I can tell you in the Baalbek Bekaa valley, where I am from, it's very tribal. I very much grew up in that kind of culture. And I understand. Honor is a huge thing, and they will defend their honor.
You see, and that's the interesting part again about trying to see if you had the meeting of the minds when you made the contract.
Correct.
What kind of cultural stresses were you under when you signed that contract?
Right. I've also been asked a question by someone else on this radio station about women and how informed they are when it pertains to their rights with divorce. Have you found, has it been your experience with 27 years and you've had a number of Middle Eastern people, have you found, can you tell me one way or the other whether it is true that women aren't educated enough about their rights when it comes to divorce? Because I think in this country, in this state, it's not very likely.
Yeah, see, the court system in America, for example, it is confusing. It's very confusing. So if you're from another country and you're used to those laws and you come here and you find out, oh, I can get a divorce a lot easier. But a lot of times you're not educated to that because.
So are you saying those who are here, it also depends on the length of the stay
Correct.
of the person
Correct.
filing for the divorce?
Do you have is English your second language? Do you have the ability to speak outside of your community? That's the major two things that block your knowledge of your rights is your language and being able to stray out of your community to see what your rights are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's unfortunate, but we're a melting pot country, and a lot of people in America have gone through the same thing. You know, when you were an Italian or a German who came over here,
Except
you didn't know your rights until someone told you.
Except that Middle Eastern people and other ethnic groups, they tend to live in groups. that makes it sometimes harder
Very harder.
to be educated, because you're surrounded by people where it's a lot of the blind kind of leading the blind. The flip side of that, I have had more than one former car accident client, men, who have said to me, men are greatly uneducated about their rights when it comes to a divorce. We are getting bullied and all. We're getting threatened by the women that we are divorcing. I'll call the police on you. I'll do this. I'll do that. Don't raise your voice. We're feeling abused and we're giving in. If the wife has one little thing on us, she's holding that over our head, calling the IRS, calling the FBI, calling Homeland Services, calling whatever it is. And he said, a lot. Now, again, everyone speaks from their own experience. One person said, a lot of men are caving in because when you live with someone, they know your secrets. They know everything you're proud of and every little thing you're not proud of. And now when you become in a hostile situation, that person may use that. And he said a number of men are caving in. Have you seen that too? Because I know you represent women.
Most definitely.
And you represent men.
Because again, they became educated. The woman, someone spoke to her.
They spoke to somebody. That's true. That's
their girlfriend spoke to another girlfriend.
No, actually, they spoke to a lawyer. That former client of mine, she went to a Middle Eastern lawyer who, according to my former client, filled up her head about this, that, and the other. And the first thing out of her mouth is, "Don't raise your voice. You raise your voice, I'm calling the police on you."
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And then if you're from a different culture, you're not used to that. You're like, whoa, wait a minute. Why am I walking on eggshells now in my relationship?
Yes.
It's kind of poisonous, and I don't like I don't like that kind of practice.
No.
We're attorneys and counselors at law.
Yes, we're counselors.
And a lot of attorneys forget that they're counselors.
Counselors, yes.
And you got to be extremely careful of what you advise clients.
Yes.
Because they could take it the wrong way, like the lady.
Exactly.
And just say, "Oh, wait a minute, I have a new weapon to use against my husband to make him do what I want him to do."
Right. And that's not the ethical thing to do. That's not the humane thing to do. That's not the right thing to do. Yes, we as lawyers, we're attorneys and counselors at law, and we can provoke and we can appease. Yes, we have to be advocates for our clients' rights, but it should not be done by using unethical, immoral methods.
Because what we say out of our mouths
like turning the table on someone and provoking them and calling, "You got that right."
Now you've provoked a divorce. Now you have kids who have separate households, which you say has consequences.
Correct.
So, like my mother said, God bless her soul, always think before you speak.
Always think before you speak. Indeed. Imagine if, a lawyer kind of like places the person in a situation where provoke the other person. That former client said that to me. He said, "She keeps berating my family. She keeps putting down my mother and my dad. I have a breaking point. She's now onto my mother and my dad." He said, there is no telling if the next time she's going to say something about my mother, there is no telling what I'm going to do. And again, I think the Bible says that the tongue is the smallest part of the body, but it can cause fires. It says that. It says it can cause fires. Yes. It can cause so much destruction. Yes. And that's from the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm sure every religion has something to say about the powerful, destructive effect of the tongue. Yeah. And this is when I advised them. I said, yes, she's almost provoking you. I don't know intentionally or not. He goes, I'm almost certain, because once she went to that lawyer, she came back empowered. She's trying to get the police here one way or another. I said, you walk away. You walk away. Don't listen to this, because we know once she's going to humiliate your mother, you're going to do something and maybe she's setting you up.
Yeah.
You walk away.
And then you're in a much worse position.
Right. And then what a lot of people still don't know is once the police is involved, you can kiss and make up as is power tomorrow. Guess what? They're not out of your hair.
That's correct.
Because
There's
now
a
it's in
record now.
Not only a record, it goes to the prosecutor. The prosecutor may decide to charge, because sometimes you don't kiss and make up the day after. It goes through, you're teaching him or her a lesson, and the prosecutor is filing charges, and parents are getting involved, and the priest and the sheikh and the cousins and the getting involved, and then they talk sense into you, and then you decide you're not going to testify, and you've already paid lawyers, and the kids have been traumatized, and people have gotten involved, and now you say, okay, it's all forgiven. We kiss and make up. Well, no, there is a record.
Yeah.
And God forbid, should this happen again, now there are two records of the police being called into the same household where the husband has allegedly, hurt the wife or something like that. It becomes very hard.
Very hard.
Those things are not to be called. Calling the police in a domestic dispute or threatening to call the police are not things to be taken lightly.
Correct.
Having said that, though, when is it legitimate and when is it sound advice to tell people you should call the police?
When you have immediate threat of being physically harmed or your children.
Okay. So when you feel that you are in immediate threat of either yourself being harmed or your children being harmed, or even the person threatening to harm herself or himself.
Yeah, sometimes you got to protect them from themselves.
From themselves, correct. Then you can and you should call the police.
Yes.
It's an imminent, meaning it's a danger now. You feel the danger now. You feel the danger that you may be hurt, your children may be hurt, or the other person may be hurting herself or himself.
Correct.
Okay. I thank you for sharing with us that Michigan Court of Appeals case that talks about dowry.
Yes.
And at least that's half of the issue. What to do with dowries and how to treat them in an American civil court.
Now, the one interesting thing about the issue, though, is even though this opinion came out, it's still not technically restrictive in negotiating your divorce. Because even though your contract says that,
if the parties later agree to change that, that's not a problem. But if there is disagreement, then they can invoke that.
Yeah, we have a house that we can sell. We can split the equity. You can keep the car. I'll pay for the kids' college education.
You can always replace the contract.
You can always make a new one.
Yes. But when there is disagreement,
then
you can invoke
what you have.
Right, you can invoke if it's to your liking, or you are stuck if it's not your liking. But at least I like the fact that as it pertains to dowries, now in the 7 minutes remaining, does that mean, Attorney Mark Gazdagi, that people who are entering into religious marriages ought, in your opinion, to consult an attorney so that piece of paper in which they're agreeing on dowry will hold the test and will really be seen as a contract later should it come to that? Do you think that now we need to?
I do. If it's happening in the United States, if you're getting married in the United States and you want to follow your religion, and that religion prefers a marriage contract, you want to see an attorney to see if the language will hold up to the contract term, contract analysis of.
Because we're talking about a contract in English in America.
Yeah. And you also probably want to see a financial advisor too, because lawyers typically aren't financial advisors as well.
That's when the dowry is a huge in amount, or that's when
You know, you
you're talking
guys-
about people who enter into
yeah.
prenups who have substantial assets.
Or not even if you have substantial assets. You could go to your local bank and just talk to their financial advisor. They're happy to talk to you.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Will they
most
advise
definitely.
you about marriage?
No, not marriage, but more along the lines of this is the asset we're talking about. You think that's wise if we tie it up like this? Or,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
It's like investing.
Okay.
Like we had a few callers the last few times we've talked where they want to invest in something, and no one ever talks to an attorney, and no one ever talks to a financial advisor of whether or not that's wise or not.
Yes. And,
Because,
you know,
like, for example, the tax laws change
yes.
all the time.
Yes. And, you know, the concern is always for people spending money, wasting money, saving money. And that's all very good. But imagine if you enter into an agreement for your dowry, whether you're the man or the woman, and it gets disputed in a divorce later. It's going to cost you a lot more money to fight that issue than the money you would have spent
Most likely, yeah.
making sure that in the first place it is a contract.
Most
It
definitely.
is a contract that will be held as a good contract under contract law here in the state of Michigan, here in the state of California, here in the state of New York, here in the United States. So it will take an hour or 2 or 3 of the lawyer's time to make sure that that prenuptial agreement is truly a contract. It looks like a contract, and it walks like a contract, and it quacks like a
That's
contract.
right.
So it's really a contract. And in fact, should it be disputed later, one of the things that a court looks at in a contract, did you have legal advice?
Correct.
Because if you had legal
And
advice,
it's more than likely the 4 corners of the document is going to be considered a
right,
contract.
that means that you
You
really
just saved
knew
a whole bunch of money
right
fighting
there.
about whether or not it's valid or not.
You got that right, because once the court says, well, you consulted an attorney, and in fact, maybe here's your attorney's signature, and you consult an attorney, and one of you right now is coming telling me this is not a good contract, or I did it under duress, or I didn't know what I was signing, or I
Correct.
didn't know what I was giving away.
And this took a few days
You-
to do. Yeah.
Right. And so you spent $500, $300, $200 before to do it right, versus should it be an issue later, it's going to cost you a lot more.
Oh, yes.
In addition to all the grief. And like you said, just to summarize, like you said, parties to a contract, whether it's a prenuptial contract, a contract for dowry, whether it's a contract for selling a car, selling a home, whether it's a contract for services, you can always change a contract. You can always cancel a contract and create a new contract. So you can create it, then go through the divorce and come to both change your mind and say, that sounded good then, but this is how we're going to do it now. As long as the parties agree, the courts are okay.
Yeah.
Obviously as it pertains to everything, with the exception of the children, because the court still has to apply the best interest. What if both parents want to agree to something that's not in the best interest of the children? The court will not rubber stamp it. But the courts are happy when the parties are happy. If you change your mind and you don't want to anymore abide by that contract, both agree, that's fine. But it's when one disagree, one wants it and the other doesn't, or one doesn't want it and the other does, then it becomes an issue.
Very much true.
That's good.
We'll see how the law develops.
And let us know if anybody takes up that issue of the dowry, about the dowry, to
sure
the
will.
Michigan Supreme Court. Now, in less than 2 minutes, there are other states that have been more like avant-garde in this.
Yes.
They've
New
done
Jersey,
this.
New York.
New York.
It's where you find large ethnic groups.
Right. So
Like, see,
somebody
it's
got
like
before
in
the
New
court
York-
sooner.
Yeah, see, like in New York and New Jersey, you have a large populace of Islamic people, but you also have a large populace of Jews.
Yeah.
And they have marriage contracts too.
Yes.
And instead of in the Islamic religion, it's called a mar. In the in Judaism, it's called a get.
Get?
Yeah. Get.
G-E-T?
Yeah, something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or G-E-T-T. I'm not sure.
Yes.
But it's almost similar. It's very similar. So
The idea is the same.
the same because it came from the same world, the same area of the world, same concerns.
Right.
You know, we had back. If you think back in the day, 1,000 years ago or more ago, marriage was serious in the sense
And it
that
was for life.
Yeah, if I'm losing my husband, I'm losing my ability to live, to have income, to have subsistence. So the jewelry that I'm promised or the animals that I'm promised allowed you to start a new life.
Yes.
And that's serious back then.
Yes.
Because in a lot of cultures, women were considered property.
Yes. So in New Jersey and in New York, did they hold that the contracts for dowry were in essence prenuptial agreements?
Yeah, they looked at it as,
and were enforced as valid contracts?
If we can look at that document and consider with antiseptic contract analysis
that it was a contract,
that it was a contract,
valid contract,
then why not?
Then
be
it is a
enforceable?
contract and it will be enforced.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Attorney
it's
Mark
always a pleasure.
Gazdagi,
Thank you.
on shedding light on a very important issue that touches a lot of people here in the state of Michigan, because we have a very large ethnic Middle Eastern group. Thank you for sharing with us all the changes in the law that happen. I look forward to reading that Court of Appeals, and perhaps we can discuss it again, or I will go on the radio and summarize it in Arabic. The time didn't allow us to make much of we did not translate any of this in Arabic, so perhaps we should take that up one more time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney
Always a
Mark
pleasure.
Gazdagi.